APIs into a single data graph, and it will give a single endpoint basically. So on that single endpoint, you can send your query, and like Anypoint data graph will take care which API you need, like which API needs to be called. So it will automatically do all your orchestration choreography of the call, and like it will fetch the data, it will aggregate the data, and it will return back to the client. So that is the like capability provided by the GraphQL or Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph is basically a unified platform for your API to design, develop, and manage. It also allows to discover, manage, or serve the data from the multiple APIs using a single data graph request. So basically, like let I will give a simple scenario. So basically, like if you want to call a multiple API, right? So what you will do? So like for calling the multiple API, or you want to fetch a customer data, you want to fetch a relative accounts data, or you want to fetch a relative balance data, or you want to fetch the relative transaction data. In that case, you have to write a heavy business logic at a process layer, where like you have to ensure that you call all the APIs, you fetch the data from all the API, you do the aggregation, then you send to your Express API, and from Express API you can send to your customer, right? So you have to write all this logic basically. But with Anypoint data graph, you don't have to write a single line of code. You can use your existing API, and you can add those existing API to unified schema, and like later, like so like later, once you add all those things to your unified schema, so Anypoint data graph will take care of all this orchestration and aggregation of a data. I will definitely show you the good example. We will take one of the banking example, where like we will try to fetch, we will try to call the multiple APIs, and like we will see like how Anypoint data graph is aggregating the data and send it back to the client basically. So as you see, like so it will reduce lot of efforts for the developer to call the multiple APIs and aggregate the response. With Anypoint data graph, you can request only data you want, no more or no less basically. Simple, right? So you can send the query to your Anypoint data graph, and it will ensure that it will just return back only those data which you want basically. So it will reduce the network congestion sometime, like for example, I have a web application and I have a mobile application. So there might be possibility like my web application required 10 fields, my mobile application required 2 fields basically, right? So in that case, what we do, like generally at expense layer, we will have a two API, one web API and one mobile API. And like we will ensure that we are sending 2 fields to your mobile API, and 2 fields to your web application basically. Let consider in future there is a other channel is coming, like any IoT device that, or any IoT other kind of thing, other kind of consumer, and he wants 4 field. So he will going to create one more API, like which will filter or which will make sure just returning a 4 fields, right? With Anypoint data graph, you can avoid this kind of thing. We will going to see in demonstration. Any question till now for Anypoint data graph? Let me check.
No, Jackie. I'm just monitoring the chart here. So,
Okay.
one second.
Okay.
Yeah, no, sorry, sorry. Lalsha. Where does
So
any
Lal,
point data graph? Yeah, please.
Lal, you wait for no, like at the end you will going to see that, like we have a one slide for that. So I will going to show you like where Anypoint data graph sits. Okay. Then let me talk about some of the advantage of your Anypoint data graph. So basically, it unify the multiple APIs into a single data service. So like it provide a single endpoint. Through that single endpoint, you can call multiple APIs basically. And with Anypoint data graph, you can serve the data from multiple underlying API within the single request without writing code. So you can unify, like you can add all your API into unified schema without writing a single line of code. It's a complete configuration. You can make use of that config, like you can configure and you can add your API into unified schema. Once you add those API into the unified schema, then you can access those API using the a single Anypoint data graph endpoint. So developer doesn't have to write a single line of code basically for parsing, for aggregating, or for orchestration or choreography of the call, right? So it will be automatically taken care by Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph is completely a managed service. So managed service means like you don't have to worry about underlying hardware, or you don't have to worry about maintenance, or you don't have to worry about any patching basically. So request the data you want, no more or no less. So basically it's similar to your SQL query, where you can select like what fields you require. So similarly, like you can send the query to your data graph, and data graph will just return the fields which you require. It's reduced development and maintenance efforts. So we have already talked about that. Anypoint data graph is a managed service and no need to worry about underlying infrastructure and maintenance. So these are the some advantage provided by Anypoint data graph. And one of the main advantage, what I feel like, so like it reduces a lot of development developers efforts basically, like, so generally we write like for doing orchestration or choreography of the call, or to like, or to aggregate the data, we write a process layer, and also at the experience layer, like if you want, if like some of the channel require 4 field, or some of the channel require 10 fields, so we write a multiple experience API. So like with Anypoint data graph, like you can avoid that. But if you like, if you have a complex logic, if you have any complex business logic, like where you have to do the complex transformation, so those kind of things cannot be done by Anypoint data graph, where you have to use your process API basically, like, so it can do orchestration of the call, it can do the choreography of the call, it can aggregate the data. But when it comes to complex business logic, when it comes to complex data transformation, it cannot be like, you cannot define your own data transformation or anything at any point data graph basically, right? So that has to be taken care at a process layer or expense layer basically. Okay, there are definitely, like, everything comes with some restriction. So Anypoint data graph supports, like, your API must be in like RAML or open API specification. So that's a first requirement. It only support get method. So so basically GraphQL support all the HTTP method, but this particular, like, Anypoint data graph currently only supporting a get method. It doesn't support ports, post, put or patch or any kind, any other delete or this kind of method doesn't support it. So you can add like 250 APIs per unified schema basically. So you can add like 250 APIs, like 250 application per unified schema. So like 16,000 field per unified schema. So your 250 API, like, in that, like in that, you should not have a more than 16,000 fields basically. It should be like equal to or less than 16,000 field. Now Anypoint data graph restrict, so when you are calling downstream REST API, right? So there is some restriction. So maximum of 150 concurrent or ongoing call per unified schema basically. So in one unified schema, so like you can have up to like 150 call, like 150 threads, or you can call it as a 150 calls, running basically at a time. If let's consider 151 request come, it will get filled, like, saying 503, or like, server unavailable, something like. So like one of the thing with Anypoint data graph, like it always throw a data exception error, it always give a 200 response basically, in case, even in case of failure also, right? So the, like, per call, like, it should per call have a 5-second timeout, like, you should not have a, like, let consider, like, if you are sending any query to data graph, and data graph can call the multiple APIs, so those, like, those things should be completed, like I have a, like, on Anypoint data graph, I got a request, and in that request, I need to call two APIs. So if I'm calling API one, so that request must be complete within the 5 second. I should get the response back from downstream API within the 5 second. Okay, the maximum of 5 MB of response data per call. So basically, if you are calling multiple, right, and like you are aggregating the data, it should not exceed more than 5 MB basically. Now the overall query time, like overall timeout for per query is 30 seconds. So if you are calling, like, I got a request on Anypoint data graph where I need to call the 5 API basically. So Anypoint data graph will call the 5 API, it will aggregate the data, and it will send back. So that whole request must be complete within the 30 seconds basically. Let consider, like, in case if it's not completing 30 seconds, so it will throw a exception back to the client basically. So it will, like, it will always send 200 response, but in payload it will throw the data exception kind of thing. Maximum of 100 selected field per query. So you can, like, send up to 100 fields. Like you can, like let consider, if I have a table, in that table I have a 200 field, right? But in select query I can just have a 100 fields basically. Same logic apply here. Doesn't matter how many API are calling. So like one has, like from API one I have to call 10 fields, from API 2 I have to call 10 fields, like from API like 10 I have to call 10 fields basically. If it's going more than 100 fields for all the APIs, right? So then it will be like, it will get out basically. It will throw a data exception. Any question?
From Prithvi.
Do we need API manager to configure this limit API? Prithvi, I will be coming on that. Okay, so like, so during the demo I will be coming on that basically.
Yeah, I think I'll continue. Yeah.
So I will show this slide later. So let me read out like first. So basically like it also provides, I have forget to mention one point. So here you, when you say 30-second timeout, right? So on my data graph, I got like, let's consider if I get the like to call the 20 APIs, right? And like if it's calling the 20 APIs sequentially, in that case 30-second will be less. So that is not a case. It will not call the API sequentially. It will call the API in parallel, basically in the concurrently. Like it will not call it like if I want to call 30 separate API, right? So it will do all the requests parallelly, basically. Okay, so it will be not sequential. So in that case 30-second, I think it should be enough. So also like I will suggest you like always make sure like so when you are using your Anypoint data graph, you make sure like your API is responding less, in less than 5 seconds. So here is the like per API response timeout is 5 seconds. It's around 5 seconds, basically. Okay, it also provide a good capability where you can trace, or like kind of distributed tracing. Have you heard about distributed tracing, right? So where it will show like all the calls, like on any point data graph you got one query. In that query you have to call the multiply API. You can trace that with this particular trace tool, basically. So it provides a UI where you can go and check like so like which API is taking much more time and which API took lesser time. Those kind of things can be checked. You the performance of your API using this particular tracing tool, basically. I will showcase that also with live demonstration. It like it support a few authentication mechanisms. So right, like my Anypoint data graph will call downstream API, right? So basically make sure like your downstream API, like having this basic authentication, client ID enforcement via header, client ID enforcement via query parameter, any custom, like you can add any custom header or query parameter. So these are the only authentication mechanisms supported by Anypoint data graph. Apart from this, it doesn't support any other authentication mechanism, basically. So these are the only authentication mechanisms supported. We're going to see that also. So so basically like hosting options. So there are few hosting options. So you can definitely access your Anypoint data graph using shared load balancer and via dedicated load balancer also. Okay, so by default it provide when you configure your Anypoint data graph, it provide a single URL, right? That single URL is the shared load balancer URL, basically. Okay, so like, and that URL can only access the application which is deployed on port 8081 or port 8082. Let's consider like my application is deployed within the VPC on port 8091 and port 8092. So how can you access that particular application from Anypoint data graph, right? So it is possible, you can definitely do that. So like you need to do something with your Anypoint CLI. So basically you have to ensure that like you add the dedicated load balancer URL to your Anypoint data graph. So there is a good steps given on so let me showcase that page. Yeah, so like you need to add this your any like your load balancer URL, dedicated load balancer URL for Anypoint data graph. So these are the few steps, like so like this is Anypoint CLI scripts. So like so you just have to like get the URL, then like you need to add your DLV URL, basically, to your data graph. And it's simple, like you just have to like perform 3 or 4 steps. Once you done those steps, right, then you can access your Anypoint data graph using dedicated load balancer, basically, using dedicated load balancer. Apart from that, you need to set up some kind of rule. So like on your Anypoint on dedicated load balancer, so you have to set up these 4 rules, basically. So ensure that whenever you are configuring your and dedicated load balancer for accessing the Anypoint data graph, you need to access, like you need to configure this particular 4 rules, basically. So these are the 4 rules need to be configured. So this, then it will ensure that it can access your dedicated load balancer, can send the request to Anypoint data graph, and Anypoint data graph can access the downstream API which is deployed on port 8091 and port 8092, basically. So these are the 4 rules, like it's the 4 simple rules that you have to configure, basically. So like what does this app name? So whenever like, see, as I mentioned, whenever you configure Anypoint data graph, it give one URL, right? So you will see that data graph xz this is now. So this is the this is the app name. Like it means like the request will transfer to this URL. So you are getting the request on dedicated load balancer slash GraphQL, and it will transfer the request on this particular endpoint slash output. So it will put a GraphQL at the end basically, right? So these are the rules you need to configure. This is standard rules that you need to always configure on your dedicated load balancer, so it can transfer your request from dedicated load balancer to Anypoint data graph, and from Anypoint data graph the request can go to the application deployed on port 8091 and 92. And if you want to access the application which is deployed on port 08081 and port 8082, you can simply use this shared load balancer URL. So whenever you configure your Anypoint data graph, it give one URL, that is the shared load balancer URL. Okay. Here, so let's consider like I have few this particular two two API led connectivity architecture, one with Anypoint data graph, one without Anypoint data graph. So this is with without Anypoint data graph, and this is with Anypoint data graph. So here like I have like some system API, process API, and experience API. So like in system API, like like so mobile API will, like in system API I have a SAP, I have a Salesforce, I have a orders, like I have a three system API which are connecting to three different systems. Then I have a mobile API at a experience layer. So basically like mobile API has to fetch the order history basically. So order history like will contain list of order and like like who is the customer for that particular order, right? So in that case, what it has to do, like so this customer like will call SAP customer, Salesforce customer, right? It will merge like at a process API, it will merge the data. Then like order history will call order data to fetch the order data, and then again it will join, or it will aggregate the response from customers and the orders. Then it will send to the mobile API. In case if you are using like Anypoint data graph, like the system layer remains same, but you can introduce your unified schema, like of customer and order at process and experience layer basically. Have to create any separate mobile API or order history API, customer API. So with like mobile application can send the query language to your Anypoint data graph unified schema. Then unified schema will automatically call this no the SAP customer, Salesforce customer order. It will fetch the data, and it will do all like filter, sort, join, merge. Everything will be done at this particular layer basically, and send to the mobile application. In future, I am getting one more customer, or like I will say more consumer, that is web application, and he just want to fetch the customer data. He doesn't want all data. So simply he can send the query to this Anypoint data graph unified schema. The query will come. Then this like that unified schema like will check the query. In query it is just expecting customer data. The customer data will it will only call the SAP customer and Salesforce customer. It will fetch the data, it will join the data, and it will send back to the your more like like new consumer basically. So that is how the like data graph fits with API led connectivity. I will not say Anypoint data graph can replace API led connectivity. That is never possible. Okay, but like as I mentioned, if you have a complex business logic, if you want to do complex transformation, that cannot be done by Anypoint data graph. But in case like if you want to do sorting, aggregation of data, choreography, or orchestration of call, in that case you can definitely make use of Anypoint data graph. Is this clear? I think somebody asked me question about Anypoint data graph, like, so Mohammed, I will come on that, like how data can be filtered and sorted. So I will come on that. So Lal, have this answer your question? Like you asked me one question about API led connectivity, or do you have any other follow up question on that?
In the chat. Maybe I think there are a few more questions, Jackie. You can take up those things, then we can let's see.
Arun, I will
Yeah.
come on that. Okay.
Hmm.
So when I will show the demo, so Arun, like you can definitely do that, which just I will show again. Like no, I will definitely do that. Okay. So let me go back to this slide. So we have a hosting option. Let's consider like I want to access the API basically, right? Which is the customer hosted basically, right? Okay, you can do that, like logically you can do that. So basically what you have to do, you have to create a proxy in your VPC basically. Okay, and like that proxy will be communicating with your on-premise like data or on-premise application basically, right? If it's not publicly available. And also you need the VPN setup, like from VPC you need, like in within the VPC you need the VPN setup. That VPN connects to the on-premise basically. So those kind of things you need to do. I will explain again. So basically what happened, like now I'm assuming like you have a API which is deployed on premise and that is not accessible publicly basically. So I'm like, that is your requirement, and I want to make sure like this particular API, like I can use, like I can add into your unified schema. So that is your requirement, right? I got it. So first thing you have to make sure like you have a open API specification, and like or like your API must be in open API specification or REST API modeling language basically. That's the first requirement. Second requirement, like you have to ensure that like you have an application, like you have a VPC setup, you have a VPN connection setup from your cloud up to on premise basically. So that's like, so that's a third thing. The fourth thing what you have to do, so like you need some intermediate application like between your Anypoint data graph and like your like on premise, which can talk to your on premise application. So I will create a proxy application basically, right? So that proxy application can talk to your on premise, and like your Anypoint data graph can talk to the proxy application. That is how you can do that. So it's possible, like is this answer your question? So as I mentioned, Lal, like Anypoint data graph is managed service basically, right? So we don't know where it is, like it will be get installed in your default region basically, like whatever default region you have choose basically, right? So it will create the instance there basically, but you don't have any control basically. So it automatically scale up, and it automatically, like depending on your number of requests, but also make sure it have few restriction. You need to ensure that like you have taken care of those restriction also. Arun, have I answered your question? Yeah, Arun.
I think
Okay.
he's saying there was something 1 minute. So just take up the other questions now, Jackie. Maybe then we'll see if he responds by the time.
So let me ask Prithvi, do we need API manager to configure those limitations? Prithvi, you can definitely, like, I like you cannot like apply the API manager on the top of your, Anypoint data graph endpoint. But there is a way basically, like you can create a proxy for your Anypoint data graph endpoint, and like on proxy you can put this as a rate limiting and all those kind of thing basically, right? So that is possible. And also I think like you can apply some SLA based policy on Anypoint data graph also. You can do that, like I will show you that, Prithvi, once I will show the demo.
Okay,
So
just
let me go.
continuation to that. If I do that proxy thing, so it may consume again that point one deployment, right? Point one
Yeah,
core.
and it also
Okay.
like other thing, like so if your number of requests is increasing, right? So like when you will going to use your Anypoint data graph, whenever like you will create lot of API within the unified schema, right? So I'm assuming like your number of requests will be much more than like much more than when you are sending like non-unified API basically, right? So in that case, you may require more than zero point 0.1 vcore. Maybe sometime like you may require zero point 0.2 vcore or maybe more, and it must be deployed on two workers for high availabilities and all those things basically. So better, like I will not refer to go with proxy. Better to use directly Anypoint data graph endpoint basically. At least it will give the assurance, like it ought, like depending on number of requests it automatically scale up or scale down, if you have taken care the restrict, like whatever restriction suggested by MuleSoft.
Hmm. Understood. Yeah.
S- Arun, like let I will give a simple thing, like how, like if I have a Anypoint data graph, right, and my Anypoint data graph is managed service. It's a platform as a service, like and it can connect to the application like which is available publicly. If you want to connect the application which is a private, right, for that you need some kind of setup, like VPC and VPN setup. Otherwise directly it will not connect without VPC, VPN, and this proxy approach. It will not connect. Okay, like if in case in case like if your application deployed in the private cloud and it has some public endpoint, right? In that case you can definitely configure that public endpoint on your Anypoint data graph. But if it is not accessible, then like without VPN and VPC you cannot do that, right? That is the simple, basically as simple as that. Okay, so my I have a three demos today. So the first demo basically like so I have these three endpoints. Basically I have an open banking API which have a three endpoints: account, balances, and the transaction. Okay, and like the requirement is that like my mobile application require a fewer field than my web application. So you can simply send the query basically to Anypoint data graph, and Anypoint data graph will call this downstream API accounts. Basically account will send the response back to the Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph will filter out the fields which has been requested by web application or like mobile application. Then it will send that response back to mobile or web application depending where from where the request is coming, right? So that is the demo one. Basically here we like that here the intention is that like how we can ensure that like we are just returning the field which has been requested, not more than that or not less than that, basically. So that is the requirement in demo one. In demo two, like this is like a more complex scenario where like I have a three endpoints: account, balances, and the transactions. So mobile application like and web application both require like account detail, related balance detail, and related transactions detail. So my like my web application will request to Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph will do the automation of call to will like will call accounts API, balance API, and transaction API, get the response from all the three like endpoints. It do the aggregation of data. It will send the response back to the mobile application or the web application depending from where the request is coming, basically, right? So like you have to tell like you have to tell in the request like what are the data you require, and like from which like which API. So you have to mention that those kind of thing, basically. The third scenario, it's very good scenario where like like there is a concept of foreign key and the primary key, basically. So like in this case I have accounts API, I have a customer API. So these are the two separate API, basically, like all together a separate API. So within that, in accounts I have accounts as an endpoint, in customer I have a customer as an endpoint, basically, right? So there are like few endpoints there. So what is happening here, like in my accounts, like I have to like call the related customer data, basically. So whenever like the requirement is that I have a like accounts detail in other API, I have a customer detail in other API, but with account I have to send the related customer information to the client, basically, right? In that case what will happen, account ID will be the primary key in accounts, and the customer ID will be the primary key in customer, and customer ID will be the foreign key in the accounts. So that is the relation we will going to set up, and we will going to see that demo also. So these are the three demo we will going to see. Any doubt on demo? Yeah, Mohammed, like I just explained, like you can definitely do that. You need the VPC, VPN, and all this kind of setup, basically. Then you can do that. Okay, so let me open the Postman first. I will show what I have right now. So in my runtime manager, I have a three APIs deployed. We will going to test this first scenario. So I have a open banking API, I have a like customer API, and I have a accounts API. So let me copy this URL. Let me show the response. It's API slash accounts, then customer 123. This should be get. So this is the API which is returning all the accounts. And let me check if I have one API. I want to fetch a single account. So this is the API which is returning a single account, basically. Okay. Okay, so let me go like apart from that, like we have a raml for that. So I have like written the raml for that. See, open banking customer API. This is my RAML. Yeah, this is the RAML. Okay. Then I have also added the API instance in my API manager for open banking. Okay, so this is, and like I have peer my runtime manager application, which is like runtime application to the open banking API using the API auto discovery basically. And also I have added the consumer endpoint. This is very important. So you need to tell where is your API exists. So this is my runtime manager endpoint where my application is deployed. Now next thing, I will go to data graph basically. I will add unified schema. So here it will like also make sure like your RAML is published into your Anypoint exchange. So I will use open banking. Next, configure URL. So lot of doubt I will going to clear here. So conform selection. So you just select what is the version. So like get the existing URL from Anypoint platform. So basically like it will automatically get the URL which we have set up in the API manager. So you can see that the consumer endpoint URL is automatically reflecting here. In case if your instance is running outside your runtime manager, right? So you can provide that URL here. So somebody told me like I want to feel like I want like to my API instance is deployed in like customer hosted mule runtime or on private cloud. If VPC VPN setup is there, so like so you can provide any proxy URL which can talk to your like customer hosted mule runtime or like mule API or mule API which is deployed on the private network. Other thing, one more thing, like if any public API, right? So like any API which is accessible over the internet, so you can directly give the URL here. You don't require VPC VPN setup. But for now I will go with this particular setup. I will say provide authentication mechanism. So right now my downstream API doesn't have any authentication. You can you can directly access those API, but it support four kind of authentication mechanism which we support, which we have discussed: basic authentication, client ID enforcement, this kind of thing. Okay, so let me go preview schema. So here it will give all the like methods within my API basically. Then I say next, edit schema. I don't. So just you can, if you want to disable any method, you can simply say hidden. So this method will be not visible. So let me, I will keep, and I will simply say add to unified schema. So it takes some kind of time, at least 1 to 2 minutes. Sometime maybe more, sometime maybe less. It depends. So right now you see it should be up to date, like So let's wait. Any question? I can take it, and if there's any question. Okay. So these are some application which I've created. Yeah, it's updated now. Like you can simply click on this run a query. So like you have to create the application, so create new application. So I will say next. I will just say uh, Finland meetup demo. So it will give, like, it will create a client ID and the client secret for you. Okay, so here basically you can write, here I will say accounts, I will say customer ID, which is 123, and I want company. Let I will just run a simple query. Let's see what happens. So I got a company basically. I want more fields basically, right? I want phone, I want last name, I want first name. I will run it. So I got, like, so like last name, phone name, like, first name, everything, like, right. So like whatever data you want, you can just request in your query basically. And also I mentioned it does sorting for you, right? So in the, like, in the sequence, you are sending the field, you are getting the response back in those sequence. In case if you require ID at the top, right, so you can simply send the ID from top basically. So you will get the ID at the top. So basically what is happening here, so I will show you, like, so let me do, where is the tracing? So let me show, I will run this query again. So here you have an option for tracing basically. So let me show that. So what it does, so like it called the accounts API, okay, which which took around 62 milliseconds for like calling, like it do parsing, it does validation of your query, then it called this accounts API because I already request for the accounts API basically. Then like from accounts API it will get all the fields written, then it will do the filter out, like whatever field we requested, right? So only it will send those those fields to us basically, right? Then this is the one of the use case where like you can just send the request with the field which you want basically. That's a first demo, like here, like, we completed demo one. Any question on demo one? No. I'll go to this particular demo where I have to call the multiple endpoints, right? So I want
One quick thing, Jackie. I think this law asked the question there. So the schema thing. Can you name the unified schema, or it create a manual, or it can be renamed?
no, like unified schema, like you cannot rename the unified schema. Why you want to uh, change the unified schema name basically, right? So, so within that unified schema, like you are talking about which unified schema? So see, it doesn't, this you cannot change it, right? So this is the constant name, this is like you cannot change this particular name, right? So within unified schema, so within the unified schema you can have a list of API, so like up to 250 API is supported. So whatever name you have given for this API into your Anypoint exchange, that will get reflected here, but you cannot change anything, like any name of unified schema or anything. Okay, is this answer your question?
Hmm. Yeah, I think you can have the one more question next to from Harish.
How to pass the
What is
query
the
to
query?
request? I will show in like, in Postman basically. So how to pass the query in the request to the data graph endpoint, I will there, so I will going to show that. Okay, so let me go with second demo. So I will go to run query. So accounts by account ID, so where it will give account ID, I think it's one only. Yeah, let me pass this query. I got it. So like I want phone, I want last name, I want first name, then I want account balances by account ID. So where I have to pass account ID here also. So which is one, amount, balance type. Let me send the request. So here you can see, like, so I will show that. So here it is calling the account by ID, and it is calling the API account balance by account. Now I also want the transactions basically. So I can simply say account transactions by account ID, and then I can say one currency. I can say transaction date. So it will also give us some intelligence of the field basically. So what are the fields available? So now you got the transactions or the related transactions, but this name doesn't looks good, right? So what you can do, you can always add alias basically. Okay, and you can just fire the query. So you got the better name, balance is related to transaction related account, right? So even you can prettify this one. Then also, like, uh, any question on second scenario basically. So this is your, let me copy this client ID and the client secret. Okay, this is my client ID and client secret, and let me show, with query trace query also. So I told you, right, it do the parallel calls basically, right? So let me show that. So if you see, like, it start with balances, like it does like call in the parallel basically. You can see that, like, so like it start with accounts, then like at some point it start with balances, and at some point it start with transactions. The overall, like, request completed in 91 milliseconds basically. So you can see that here, so you get this particular, you proper, like, proper graphical representation or visualization basically, like, how much time taken by each and every APIs basically, for respond, like, for responding back, those kind of things. So apart from that, let me, I'm just, I want to show one more demo. Yeah, this is the graph endpoint basically. Okay, so you can see here, this is the graph endpoint. So let me test with the graph endpoint also. So what I will do, so we always use the post method. So don't get confused, like GraphQL only support get method. So get method for the downstream API. So whenever you want to post a query, you always use the post method. So this is graph endpoint, and, like, within body you can just say GraphQL. Okay, then, like, I can, where is my query? This is my query. So let me request it. Authentication field 401. Yeah. Okay. So this is the expected result, because I have to configure client ID secret. So I can go to header. I can say client ID. Let me copy this client ID and client secret. Send the request. You got a successful response back. You can see that, right? Any question? I hope, like, somebody asked me how to pass a query request. I hope this answer your question. Why not? You can definitely, you can use the HTTP requester connector, right? With HTTP request connector, you can configure all this client ID, client secret, and GraphQL endpoint. You can definitely use that. So Lal, like, it's not about the grouping. Like, here we are not talking about the grouping, right? So you can add as many as API you want under the unified scheme, up to 250 50 APIs basically. So what name you are talking? I don't understand. Like, Lal. So basically, so for when you talk about the RTF, right? So it's, see, this is like basically for cloud up, but there is a workaround, like, to enable the Anypoint data graph for RTF also, as I mentioned. to have a VPC VPN kind of setup. Okay, and like VPC VPN kind of setup, and where you can deploy a proxy API. So Anypoint data graph can talk to proxy, and proxy can talk to your API deployed on the RTF. So those kind of setups will be required basically. It's same like you can pass the query parameter in the same as we pass as a URI parameter. If you have multiple, you just put the comma separated. No issue. Like it automatically recognizes which has to be passed as a query parameter, which has to be passed as a URI parameter. It automatically take care. In same way, like we pass in the bracket, right? Where like where is my query body? So simply you can put the comma and you can pass the other parameter like that. Let it be URI parameter or let it be query parameter. It automatically take care. So like you are getting confused basically. So here like when I talk about unified schema, it's nothing like it's kind of one component, right? Within that component you can deploy multiple API, and you are saying like so I will get confused with naming. How can you get confused, right? Because you know your API name. So if you see list of API in my unified schema, basically this is open banking API. I will have a XYZ API, I will have a ABC API basically, right? So it will list down all the APIs basically here within your unified schema. So I don't think there is any confusion here basically. Okay, I'm just removing this particular API for now because I'm going to set up a new API. Okay, so now we have tested a two scenario. Like I'm going to test with a third scenario where like we have to set up the relationship between accounts and customers basically, right? So let me start with deploying a customer API first within my unified schema. So add API. I will say customer API. Next configure URL. So conform selection. Here like I have already given my consumer endpoint basically in my API manager instance. So I will say provide authentication. I will say no authentication. Preview schema, right? So within preview schema, like I can like I will go to next edit schema. Here I need to like click on this customer and I need to enable the collaboration. So basically here I'm going to define what is the primary key in this particular API. So this is the method which return the customer uniquely, like so you should have a method which can return the customer uniquely basically. So I will just say next, and here you select your primary key, and this is the customer ID, and just say confirm. So with this particular API, the customer ID is my primary key basically, right? So you have enabled the collaboration, and here you can see customer ID has been marked as a primary key, and I will say add to unified schema and proceed to unified schema. So let's wait my customer to deploy. So we are setting up this third demo basically. So let me show my customers API also here. So let me show, not this one. Let me go to API manager. This is my customer API. So here is list of customer. Basically, I have it. Okay, and let me show the accounts also. Basically, here you can see the customer ID is primary key. API accounts. So here you can see like account ID, account type, and customer ID is the foreign key basically in this particular API. So let me check whether it is deployed or not. It is still deploying. Let me add. Yeah, it is updated. Let me add the second API. So this time I will add accounts API. Next configure URL. So I will keep as it is, like get existing URL. So I already set up this URL on my API manager instance. So I don't have any authentication. So yeah, all good here. Edit schema. So here you can click on this and you can enable collaboration, and you should have a one method which can uniquely face the account basically. So I have account by account ID where I can pass account ID, and I can say account ID is the primary key. Okay, in accounts, then I can say confirm. Then once you enable the collaboration, you have to link it. So basically, like you want to link this account with a customer. So this is customer, and here customer, I have a customer ID is a primary key, and here I can say my customer ID is the foreign key basically, and I don't want to keep it hidden. It should be also visible. So here I'm setting up the relationship between account and the customer, and always make sure you don't forget to click on this save changes, because I have done this mistake many times, and I keep on like searching like what happened, like it's not working. So if you don't save this, like these changes will not reflect. Okay, so here I'm just setting up the relationship between your accounts in the customer. Why I've set up this like relation in account API? Because I want to fetch like related customer, like for that particular account, right? So that's why I'm saying accounts, like in accounts the customer ID is the foreign key, in customer the customer ID is the primary key basically. Add to unified schema, proceed to unified schema. So now see, Lal, you have a doubt, right? So here you can see your customer API and account API. They are separately, like separate APIs basically here. But we have set up the relationship between them. So if you open this account API, and if you see the API details, not API details, yeah, if you click on these accounts, yeah, here you can see like account ID is the primary key in this customer. Like it also add the customer object here, right? You can see that, and if we click on this, so it will show the customers like details basically, right? So it will add the customer objects also. So there is a no confusion, I think, right? Till it is getting deployed. So I will show you, like if you go to API manager also, right? You have something called data graph administration. So where like you can apply SLA based policy, and you can apply client. These are the two policies supported by Anypoint data graph, and even you can disable any kind of policy you have to apply. So you will see all the contracts you have created. Right now I've created one contract where, like that is Finland meetup demo, that having this client ID and this client secret basically. Okay, so you can definitely apply the rate limiting policies, like Prithvir asked this question. You can definitely do that from here basically for this particular endpoint. I'll let check run query. So let me remove this. I want to fetch accounts. Not working because it's not deployed yet. getting customer details properly. Let me check accounts. Yeah, account type, account ID. Let me run. Yeah, I start getting the response for account. And if I want a relative customer's detail, so I can simply say customers within that only. And I can say customer is, I want customer last name, age, address, first name, from country. So let me run this query. So you will see like for customer one, so this is the like for account one, this is the customer detail. For account two, this is the customer detail. So like it automatically like call the multiple API and do the aggregation and make sure like it fetch a related accounts customer details, not other basically. So you can see that like customer ID is 5, in accounts also customer ID is 5 basically. But let me trace query here. I will run it. So like if there is a 5 account, so it will call customer for 5 times basically. That's fine. Let me check. Yeah. So here you can see like so basically I have a 5 accounts, so it will call the customer APIs for 5 times for each and every account. So basically as I mentioned, it is very important like to have some API which can uniquely like fetch the customer detail, right? So I have that particular in customers API. So it will every time call this customer API for each. So if you have a like large number of account, right? If you have 100 accounts and if you want to fetch the customer detail for each and every account, so it will do the 100 times call, right? And your query timeout it's 30 seconds. In that scenario it may fail basically, right? Even it do the parallel call, but there's a chances like no. So but you have to ensure that like you have to do some kind of performance testing or stress testing to make sure like this kind of scenario fits into your into your requirement basically. Let consider if I want to face a single account and single customer, then it's fine so if I want to fetch something called accounts by account ID, I think account ID is 123, and I can fetch customer ID, I can fetch account type, I can fetch customers. I'll just fetch small data, not large data, just first name and last name. I will execute the query. In this case, it's fine, like only one customer I have to fetch, right? So if you see the trace query also, so here it will just call like customer data for one time only. Okay. Now I want to show one more scenario. Let me open Anypoint Center. Let consider I just stop this application. Okay. In this case, if I send a request, it will always give 200. So you can see you get the account data because account data is up and running. For customer, we got a data exception, basically data fetching exceptions, right? Correct. So let consider the scenario. So I will take a larger one. It doesn't matter. So I will just run it. Here you can see the customer has been errored out. It will all, so you can see all the accounts detail, but the customer is null, and you can see like 5 error, like 5 errors like while facing the customers basically. So data facing exception, you can see that all those things. So even like your one API is down, it will give the like response for other API, plus it will give the error response for the API which is down basically. So yeah, so that's all like I want to cover. If any question, I can take it. Filter, like Mohammed, what is this question? Like, is data coming from DB? Can we filter data on the basis of last? It depends. Like what kind of filter you have defined at your API level, basically, right? If you put the query params, like I want this data for this particular thing, then you can pass that into query also, basically. If your API doesn't have that particular thing, right, you cannot filter out. So you have to ensure that all kind of this filter is available within your API. So then only Anypoint data graph can pass those filter to your API, and depending on the, you can filter out the data. Okay. So that is what I want to show for today's Anypoint data graph. If any question, you can let me know. So Rajesh, I am done with my this Anypoint data graph session. Rajesh, you are talking.
Yeah. Sorry, I was talking on the mute. Good, Jackie. And thank you for the great presentation. I think
Yeah.
it's very effective and I see a lot of questions. Yes, any more questions before I'm proceeding? So this post so we'll try to utilize the time. If any questions, if not, then I'll run into the next interesting sessions, which is our trivia quiz. Okay, then I will jump into the next trivia quiz. Okay, so before starting that, so I will just tell you. So the questions will be coming up in the deck only. So I'll be just to opening up the questions in the deck. So when I'm sharing it, and just see the questions, and you'll have the multiple choices. Just type those question answers which you say. Read the questions carefully, and choose the option which is the correct. And the answers could be because a lot of times I see the people just randomly putting some ABC answers. So the answers could be the series can be changed. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, or it could be ABCD, or it could be the Roman numbers. So please read the question and answers. Type the correct choice in the chart. So I'll just consider that who is the first person in the chart. So that I'll take that as a person the winning. I'm just sharing my screen. So before that, I'll just put for my reference the chart. So hope you guys are able to see my screen. Jackie, can you confirm once, please? Good. Here is the first question. Anypoint data graph supports. So get methods, both methods, or both, none of the above. So you could type A, B, C, or D. Good. So I think you got a lot of questions, a lot of answers. Yeah. So Jackie, what to answer?
See, like Prithviraj Krishnam have given the right answer.
Yeah. So as you know that it will be supported only the get methods. So the correct answer is C. So congrats, Prithvi. So I'll go to the second question. As usual, I'll just put the chart for my thing. Any point data graph restricts the downstream REST API calls to. So I think it was Jackie was highlighted this couple of times during this demo. So maximum 50 kb, 50 seconds timeout. Good, and I see already the questions. Answer the correct answer.
Answer is C.
Yeah. So as you know that the maximum is the 5 MB is the response per data call, irrespective of the number of your unifying the APIs or combining the APIs. And the correct answer is 3. So yeah, so we should not follow 1, 2, 3. So the first
Harish.
correct answer is yeah,
Harish.
Harish. Yeah. Congrats, Harish. Can you just type your email ID here, Harish, please, in the chart? you. Anypoint data graph limits the query service to. So what was the timeout? It's a 330,000 selected fields at 200. Again, the choice was here, not 1 to 3, is ABCD.
I think we got the answer.
Yeah,
Karan Sharma, I think.
yeah, yeah. Congrats, Karan. I think Karan was the answer. Congrats, Karan. Can you type your email ID in the chat, please? Karan, I just need your email ID. Good. Congratulations to Prithvi, Karan, and Arish. So, thanks. I just noted your email IDs. So, Prithvi, I have not written because I know already the Prithvi's email ID. So, I have the three email IDs. So, post the event as part of the wrap up. I'll send a email to you guys. So, you might get a email notification. And as part of this trivia, right? So, you have option to choose the training and certification which you like. So please utilize and please connect with the training you want it and utilize it. Congrats again. Closing note. So thanks for the meetup and it was very good, excellent presentation, Jackie. So good.
Thanks, Rajesh.
So yeah, thanks for your time and dedication you spending on the deck or the demo part. So it's really
Hmm.
good. I hope the people are the good one. Enjoyed it, guys. You please post to the meetup. You will have the feedback links. So submit the feedback. And as part of that, just let me know, is there any specific topics you would like to say as part of the next meetup, coming meetup? You want to plan it. So probably we'll have in the another next 1 or 2 months next meetup as part of this thing. So if you have any feedback or topics or anything, you can connect me through the link. Even you can send the mail to the this particular mail ID. So that. Closing, that's the closing note. Thank you. And before the closing the note, I recording the meetup. So probably end of this as part of the wrap up, I'll try to share the meetup or this link as part of the email. Thank you guys. So is there any questions before closing? So I'll just take up if you have any questions. Otherwise we can done for the day. Good, good. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thank you. See you.